Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we peel back the layers of seemingly familiar stories to uncover, well, sometimes surprising truths hidden beneath. Today, we're taking on a biblical narrative many of us think we know pretty well, only to discover a profound reinterpretation that might just change how you see it.
Indeed. Our mission today is to really immerse ourselves in a truly fascinating section of Sir James George Frazer's huge work, Folklore in the Old Testament.
Right.
We're specifically focusing on Part 2, Chapter 3. He provocatively titled it Jacob and the Kidskins, or The New Birth.
The new birth, okay.
Yeah, it's an incredibly rich source of insights, and it really challenges our, preconceived notions about some ancient practices.
And the story that sort of kicks off Frazer's analysis here is that really familiar biblical tale, right? Jacob, Esau, and the diverted blessing.
That's the one.
You probably recall it from your own reading or maybe from stories told when you were younger. It's quite a foundational narrative for many people. So let's quickly set the scene. You know the story. Isaac, he's old, he's blind, and he asks his older son, Esau, to go hunt some venison so he can give him this special paternal blessing. But then Rebecca, Isaac's wife and Jacob's mother, she overhears this. And what happens next is what we usually read as a scheme.
That's right. The familiar account, you find it in Genesis chapter 27, verses 1 through 29. It describes Jacob bringing 2 kid goats.
Okay.
Rebecca then cooks up this savory meat. She dresses Jacob in Esau's clothes, and then, crucially, covers Jacob's smooth hands and his neck with the skins from the kid goats.
To mimic Esau's hairiness.
Exactly, to mimic Esau's hairiness. Jacob then goes into his blind father, deceives him, and gets the blessing that was meant for Esau, basically making himself the heir.
So, yeah, on the surface, it reads like a story of cunning, maybe outright deception. It's certainly presented that way in the text.
It is.
But Frazer, with his incredible scholarship, he suggests something really radical, doesn't he? A reinterpretation.
He does. He conjectures that this story might actually be a reminiscence, his word, of an ancient legal ceremony, not just some devious trick.
A legal ceremony. How does that fundamentally reshape things? I mean, our understanding of not just this biblical moment, but maybe ancient society itself.
Well, it completely reframes it. Frazer posits that in earlier times, ultimogeniture, that's where the younger son was, the legal heir, might have been a prevalent custom.
The younger son inherits.
Yes, think of it as the inverse of what most of us are familiar with today, which is primogeniture, where the firstborn inherits.
Right.
Now, if ultimogeniture was the practice back in Jacob's day, he would have been the rightful heir anyway. No trick needed.
Okay, so if Jacob was meant to inherit, why the elaborate disguise? Why the kid skins and the whole deception narrative?
That's where the layers of interpretation come in. Frazer theorizes that later on, primogeniture became firmly established. So, a historian writing in that later period might have struggled to explain Jacob's succession under the old custom. To justify it, maybe make sense of this now obsolete practice, they might have attributed a ceremony to it.
Like trying to explain something they didn't fully grasp anymore?
Possibly. And then maybe an even later editor, someone completely unfamiliar with the original ceremony's legal or, ritualistic significance, might have seen only the disguise element.
And just saw a trick.
And interpreted it as nothing more than a cunning subterfuge, maybe instigated by Rebecca to cheat Esau. So the deception we read today could be a profound misunderstanding of a forgotten ritual.
Wow.
The key elements for Frazer are the displacement of the elder by the younger, and crucially, the specific means of that displacement. The disguise, especially the use of animal skins, the kid skins.
That's fascinating. So the original meaning gets lost, but the actions themselves, like the kid skins, they survive somehow in the narrative. What clues did Frazer find in other cultures that helped him connect these dots? Where did he look?
Well, to understand this better, Frazer drew parallels from various East African tribes, groups like the Gallas, the Akikuyu, Akamba, Nandi.
Okay.
He believed their customs were invaluable because they often preserved really primitive usages, sometimes remarkably similar to those of Semitic peoples.
Right.
And these could help illustrate what might have been erased or just forgotten in other cultures. Plus, the geographical proximity of, say, the Gallas to Arabia, the cradle of the Semitic race that strengthens the possible connection, it suggests maybe a shared ancient heritage of ritual.
So these cultures are kind of like living archives, preserving ancient practices that might shed light on Jacob's story.
Precisely. And one of the most striking parallels he found is the Akikuyu ceremony of being born again.
Born again.
Yes, which they also call born of a goat or born of a sheep. This ritual was traditionally performed before circumcision, usually when a child was around 10 years old, as a way to change their status.
Being born again from a goat, that sounds incredibly vivid. I mean, really impactful. How did they actually perform this ritual?
It was quite elaborate. It happened in the evening, inside a hut, only women allowed. A goat or sheep would be killed, and its stomach and intestines were set aside. Then a piece of the animal's skin would be passed over one of the child's shoulders and the animal's stomach over the other shoulder.
So the child is wearing parts of the animal.
Yes. And the mother, or sometimes a proxy woman, would sit with the child between her knees. The animal's gut would be passed around her body and then cut in front of the child.
Mimicking birth.
Exactly, mimicking the cutting of a navel string. And then the child would imitate the cry of a newborn baby.
Wow. So the child is literally enveloped in parts of the animal. The mother simulates childbirth. This sounds like a complete transformation, not just, a symbolic gesture. What was the purpose, the profound purpose of enacting this new birth?
Well, the meaning, according to Frazer, is pretty plain. It's a profound pretense. The mother is pretending to be a she-goat or a ewe, and that she has just given birth to a kid or a lamb. This ritual essentially creates a genuine new birth for the child in the eyes of the community. It served to change their status, for instance, maybe enabling them to assist at their father's funeral later on, which they couldn't do before. It's a complete re-identification, a performative declaration of a new identity.
That really makes the kid skins in Jacob's story even more intriguing then. Were these sacrificial skins used in other ways in these cultures, beyond just these specific new birth ceremony?
Oh yes, extensively. The use of sacrificial animal skins was a really common practice across many of these East African tribes, often with a clear intention, protecting the wearer, acting as an amulet, or establishing important ritualistic bonds. Frazer found sort of three main categories of use that really stand out.
Okay, tell us more. What were they?
Well, first, they were used for binding agreements and creating new community ties.
Okay, binding agreements.
Yeah, imagine tribes like the Wachaga and Akamba forming a covenant of friendship. They'd make rings from goat skin, and both parties would wear them. Sometimes they even ate pieces of the sacrificial animal or exchanged spittle.
Whoa.
Yeah, to create this deep, binding, almost magical union. It symbolized a shared essence. And similarly, among the Akikuyu, when joining new communities, strips of skin from a shared sacrificed animal were exchanged, symbolizing merging into one blood.
So it's about forging this really unbreakable connection, making them one.
Exactly. Then the second major use was for protection and marking significant life transitions.
Protection. Okay.
Right. For childbirth, tribes like the Akamba and Akikuyu would put strips of goat or sheepskin on the wrists of the child, the mother, and the father, or just on an infant's wrist to remove ill luck.
Like an amulet.
Precisely. During circumcision rites, candidates wore skin strips on their wrists or fingers. Among the Washamba and Wachaga, these were part of prayers to ancestral spirits or offerings. The Maasai, too, used skin rings as amulets against sickness. The skin itself was believed to imbue the wearer with a protective quality.
Okay, that makes sense. And the third category, does that tie back more directly to Jacob?
It does, quite strikingly. The third is ceremonial adoption or status change. And here we see really interesting similarities to Jacob's story.
How so?
Well, in Gala adoption ceremonies, for instance, a child's hands and neck were covered with the skin or maybe the fat of a slain ox.
Just like Jacob with the kid skins.
Very similar. And this act, much like Jacob donning the kidskins, wasn't just symbolic dressing up. It was about the community agreeing to a new reality for that person, essentially rewriting their social contract or their status in a performative, really deeply meaningful way.
So putting this all together, the deeper meaning behind these practices, it isn't just simple adornment or disguise. It sounds like there's a powerful underlying logic, almost like a practical magic to them.
Absolutely. Frazer concludes that the intention, the core idea, of investing a person with a portion of a sacrificial skin is fundamentally about protection. Protecting them against some actual or maybe threatened evil, the skin acts as an amulet. And the key insight is that by wearing a portion of the animal's skin, the person identifies with the sacrificial victim. It's as if the animal acts as a buffer against malevolent forces, or its very being imbues the wearer with some kind of magical virtue.
So the small piece represents the whole animal.
Exactly. A small piece of skin becomes an abridged way, as Frazer puts it, of metaphorically wrapping the person in the whole animal for identification. It's a powerful, condensed form of a much larger symbolic act that shifts identity or status.
It's really remarkable how these ancient legal and ritualistic traditions could be remembered, even if misunderstood, through such specific tactile details like the kidskins. But this whole idea of new birth, it seems to extend far beyond just goats and skins, doesn't it? It sounds like a really profound concept, maybe a kind of legal fiction that let people change their identity or status in significant ways across many different cultures.
You're absolutely right. Frazer demonstrates that this legal fiction of a new birth was employed across various cultures for a remarkable range of purposes,
Yeah.
all fundamentally altering a person's status or circumstances.
How so?
It's basically about shedding an old personality and assuming a new one, making a fresh start. It serves as this powerful performative declaration of a new legal or social reality accepted by the community.
Like for adoption, I guess. Literally changing who your family is.
Precisely. That's a key example. In ancient Greece, the historian Diodorus Siculus tells a story about how Hercules was adopted by the goddess Hera. How? By literally passing through her garments, mimicking a real birth.
Passing through her clothes.
Yes. And Diodorus notes that this practice was followed by what he called barbarians in his time. Echoes of this even resurfaced in medieval Europe. Adopted children were sometimes called mantle children after being passed under a cloak.
Huh, mantle children.
Yeah. And even today, some southern Slavs and Turks apparently use similar customs. An adoptive mother might pass a child through her dress or a shirt to symbolize giving birth to them. In places like Borneo, adoptive parents might even observe pregnancy taboos for weeks beforehand.
Wow.
The idea is that by simulating the birth, the adoptive child truly becomes, in a way, a blood relation.
That's incredible. So it's not just symbolic, it's a real legal, cultural act of transformation. What about other situations? Like what if someone was mistakenly thought to be dead, maybe funeral rites were performed, and then they turned up alive?
Another fascinating application. The new birth fiction was also enacted for exactly those people.
Yeah.
In ancient Greece, if someone returned after being presumed dead and having funeral rites performed, they were considered unclean, polluted.
Right, because they'd been treated as dead.
Exactly. So to
Yeah.
rejoin society, they had to be ritually reborn. They had to pass through a woman's robe, be washed, swaddled, sometimes even suckled by a nurse, just like a newborn.
Yeah.
And in ancient India, there was a similar concept. A supposedly dead man would have to spend a night in a tub filled with fat and water, mimicking an embryo in the womb. Then he'd have to repeat all his life ceremonies getting initiated again, even remarrying his old wife.
Remarrying his own wife.
Yes. It was all about restoring their status as living, pure members of society, literally wiping their slate clean of those death rituals.
Okay, this raises a really important question for me. Can this new birth also elevate someone's status? Not just clean up a past mistake or change family, but actually transform them into something higher, more sacred, perhaps.
Absolutely. That's another key dimension Frazer explores. In ancient India, for example, a Brahmin householder could perform a specific new birth ceremony to temporarily become a god.
Become a god how?
Well, it was elaborate. He'd be sprinkled with water, enter a special hut symbolizing a womb, wear a specific belt representing a navel string, and an antelope skin representing the membranes. He'd even clench his fists like an embryo. Through this ritual, he was believed to acquire a new and glorified body, ascending to a superhuman, divine status. This wasn't seen as just a metaphor. It was understood as a literal transformation.
And what about changing caste? Or atoning for serious misdeeds? That seems like a huge social shift for someone.
A crucial application, and maybe one of the most powerful socially among the Korkus tribe in India, for instance. Serious social offenses. Things that might get you cast out could be expiated by being born again.
How would they do that?
The offender might be placed inside a large, sealed earthen pot, then symbolically buried in sand, emerging as a fresh incarnation from the earth. Or sometimes they'd have to run out of a burning grass hut.
A burning hut.
Yes, it sounds dramatic, but it essentially absolved them of their past sins by creating a new person. That new person wasn't responsible for the acts committed by their former self. It's a profound way to reintegrate someone who was an outcast back into the community.
So, bringing this back around then, what does all this mean for Jacob? You're suggesting his story with the kidskins, the inheritance focus, it has a much deeper ritualistic root, similar to these really profound transformations in other cultures?
Precisely. And the most striking examples, especially for high-ranking individuals wanting elevation or expiation, come from India.
Hmm.
Think about the Maharajas of Travancore.
Okay.
They belonged historically to a very low caste, but they could undergo these incredibly expensive ceremonies, like being born from a massive golden effigy of a cow or golden lotus flower, sometimes filled with products of the cow like milk and dung.
Go golden cow.
Yes, a
Yeah.
huge golden cow they would literally pass through. By emerging from this golden womb, they were considered reborn into the highest caste, the Brahmin caste. It was this immense display of ritualistic transformation, legally validating a completely new, higher status. It changed their spiritual and social DNA, so to speak.
That's extraordinary. But I imagine not everyone could afford a solid gold cow. Were there simpler versions? Does this show how these powerful ideas can maybe trickle down and adapt?
Yes, exactly. The ceremony, like many rituals, could dwindle, as Frazer puts it, into more accessible forms. For the less wealthy, maybe a real live cow might be used. A child could be passed between its legs, or someone expelled from their caste might pass under its belly to be readmitted.
Okay.
This suggests that the core idea was the new birth itself, that profound shift in status, not necessarily the extravagant golden effigy. And this concept, the ritual dwindling or being abridged, is really key to understanding how a complex ancient rite might be remembered much later in a simpler, almost unrecognizable form, like perhaps in the story we have of Jacob.
Yeah.
So, bringing it all back to Jacob's story, especially what we've dug into from Frazer's Part 2, Chapter 3, Jacob and the Kidskins, or the New Birth. Frazer conjectures that the biblical narrative, the one we read as deception, with its very specific details, the kidskins, the borrowed clothes, contains this powerful reminiscence of an ancient legal ceremony, a ceremony of new birth from a goat.
So, if Frazer's right, Jacob wasn't necessarily just a cunning trickster acting alone. He might have been participating in, or at least the story recalls elements of, a ritual act. An act designed to legally formalize his status as the heir, even though he was the younger son. It completely flips the traditional reading, doesn't it?
It really does. That's the core hypothesis. Just like in India, where a person might pretend to be born again from a cow to change their caste or wipe their slate clean, Frazer argues the ancient Hebrew custom, perhaps similar to those among the Akikuyu, might have dwindled over centuries
Into something simpler.
into much simpler acts.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're just killing a goat and placing pieces of its skin on the person.
Yeah.
And in this degenerate form, as Frazer called it, the ancient rite was reported, but crucially, it was misunderstood by the later biblical narrator,
Right.
transforming what might have originally been a perfectly valid, legal, or ritualistic act into just a tale of, well, cunning and deception. It's a powerful illustration of how cultural memory can distort things, even while preserving little fragments of ancient practices.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, how many other familiar stories we hold dear, not just in the Bible, but across all cultures, might actually be echoes of complex, forgotten rituals. Their original meaning long since obscured or just reinterpreted over time. What cultural shifts, what historical changes might have led to such profound misunderstandings, and what deeper truths might still be hidden there, in plain sight, just waiting for us to take a deep dive.
Yeah.
As we surface from this deep dive, it definitely leaves us with some profound questions about how history shapes our narratives and how rituals transform. Something to ponder until our next exploration.